We have a wonderful camera comparison, budget camera phone shootout on Android Authority that caught my attention. And it's by Ryan Thomas Shaw. Shout out. He took the Google Pixel 4a, the OnePlus Nord, and the iPhone SE, and he put them head to head in the camera department, which is a big differentiating characteristic at the budget level. Now, I've paid attention to a couple of shootouts, iPhone SE versus Pixel 4a, but now you add the Nord to the mix, which is another option in a similar price bracket.
Worthy competitor.
It's amazing to see the quality and caliber of these cameras at the subsequent price points. Obviously, the Pixel 4a, the cheapest of the bunch, the most recent of the bunch as well.
Yes.
But I looked through here, and you know, on paper, you're seeing the specs. The OnePlus Nord, by far the biggest main sensor, 48 megapixels. Also, the only one of the bunch that can shoot 4K video on the front-facing camera, in case you want to get crazy with your selfie video. It also has a 32 megapixel front-facing camera, just for stills, which is far beyond the megapixel count for the Pixel 4a or iPhone SE, where the megapixel count for those two units very similar. 8 megapixels, 7 megapixel on the front. They're both 12 megapixel on the back, you see. And so obviously a different approach. OnePlus Nord puts the bigger sensor, but we know the type of work that the Pixel team puts into the software, and we know the type of work that the Apple team puts into the software and the processing. So what better way than to just peep a few samples as you would. Now, on the first sample here, what you'll see is something that we already knew. The fact that the Pixel 4a trends a little bit cooler from a color temperature perspective, which is the flavor that I choose for my own personal preference more frequently, but might not necessarily be more accurate to real life. This particular writer, the writer of this article, the guy who ran this test, said that was closer to real life, to him, the cooler color temperature. And then also, of course, you have the contrast and everything else, which you can head over here and evaluate for yourself, and I suggest that you should. But to my eyeballs, I'm living in Pixel Town. And actually, I'm living in Pixel Town even more when you go to the next, which is the Leaf. And you don't even need to open them up. Or maybe you should, but you have the 4A, the Nord, and the iPhone SE. And I just look at the exposure on the 4A photo, where the iPhone one looks a little washy, a little wishy-washy. And then the Nord looks like it's lacking a little in the highlight. It's always been a story of contrast for me with the way that the Pixel processing works. Now, there is a photo where arguably the iPhone performs better, which is indoors and in a lower lighting environment. That's this one right here, where it's able to kind of boost the dark areas to pull out more detail if you want strictly the most detailed photo possible. Granted, once again, we have a pretty significant shift in color temperature, but if we're just going solely on detail, pulling detail, perception of a range of dynamics, otherwise known as dynamic range, then you may prefer the SE photo in that circumstance. But anyway, you scroll through, there's different sections for sharpness, detail, there's different sections for saturation and so forth, and zoom is in there as well. And you get to the bottom, and it's actually, there's night mode also. If you go to the night mode photos, I mean, it's pretty obvious what's going on there. Go check those night modes. You got a slow scroll going on there today, Will. Next one down. Next one down. Well, that one's good too. Look at the Pixel plant and the other two plants, and then go to the next one down. Look at the Lego guy. You can't even see the Lego guy on the OnePlus.
This one looks like it has a spotlight on him. Yeah.
The beard is much darker there. I mean, this is pretty obvious. The Pixel wins that round. But you go to the very bottom, and all things considered, after examining all the samples, basically this is an easy one where the Pixel 4a comes out on top. This is a subjective thing. It doesn't mean that it's better in all circumstances. It doesn't mean it's the better camera even. It just means that this particular test yielded these particular results. You can take it for what it's worth. It's posted on Android Authority as well. So take that into consideration. One of the phones in this test is not an Android phone. So let's just keep that in mind. But I'm going to go with the findings here. I'm going to say of this group, if I had to pick only one camera, I would, from my personal preference, pick the 4A. So that increases your perception of value for that device even more so if you were going to put the Nord in the mix and the iPhone SE in the mix. It's the cheapest of the bunch. And even if your preference is more towards warmer tones, or even if your preference is more towards detail in the shadows, it's still $50 cheaper than the iPhone SE.
Right.
Keep that in mind. Nice little analysis.